My wife and I bought a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. Our next-door neighbor introduced herself with a smile and said, "I control what happens on this street." We thought she was joking, until she left a note saying we couldn't paint our house without her approval. The day we started painting, she stood in her driveway with a hose and sprayed down the wall. "I said beige, not blue," she screamed. Then she called the HOA and reported us for visual aggression. I fought back and accidentally discovered a file she was keeping on every neighbor. When Mandy and I bought our first house together, we thought it would be the start of something great. We saved for years to afford even a fixer-upper, and when we found a place in New Braunfels, Texas, it felt perfect. Old oak trees, wide streets, houses that needed love but had good bones. It was quiet, too. Peaceful. Or so we thought. 2 days after we moved in, she came to the door. Short woman, maybe mid-50s, short dark hair cut sharp like she meant business, makeup perfect like she was headed to church. She wore a light pink cardigan even though it was almost 90 degrees out. She smiled wide enough to show her teeth, but it didn't touch her eyes. "I'm Patricia," she said, handing us a plate of store-bought cookies. "I run this street." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. Mandy gave a polite little chuckle too. We said thank you, took the cookies, and she stood there, just looking at us for a second too long. "You'll find," Patricia said, tilting her head, "that things work smoother when people check with me before making changes." Then she turned around and walked away like she hadn't said anything weird at all. Mandy and I looked at each other. "Texas hospitality, huh?" I joked. We didn't think about it again. For a while. 2 weeks later, we finally had time to start painting the outside of the house. The old paint was cracked and peeling. We spent hours picking a new color, something soft and light to brighten the place up. We chose a light blue. Not bright, not loud. Just clean. I started early on a Saturday morning. Got the ladder out, filled a tray with the first coat of blue, and went to work. I was halfway through the front wall when I heard a shrill voice. "I said beige, not blue." I turned, brush still dripping, and there she was, Patricia, standing in her driveway with a green garden hose in hand, aimed straight at me. Before I could react, she turned it on and sprayed down the fresh paint. "Hey! What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, climbing off the ladder. "You're ruining the look of the street," she yelled back, water spraying everywhere. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding. I wanted to charge over there and rip the hose from her hands. But Mandy ran out and grabbed my arm, telling me it wasn't worth it. I bit my tongue. I backed off. That night, we found a piece of paper wedged into our front door. It wasn't mailed. No return address. Just a typed letter saying we were guilty of visual aggression against the community and warning us of consequences if we kept painting without approval. Approval from who? We didn't even have a real HOA. There was some neighborhood association, but it was optional and had no power. We'd checked before buying. Still, it shook Mandy. She wanted to let it go. I didn't. The next day, I finished painting the house anyway. Patricia stood in her driveway the whole time, arms crossed, watching. It didn't stop there. The following week, we got a visit from code enforcement. Someone had called in a noise complaint. We hadn't been playing any music, just normal talking and hammering as we worked on repairs. A few days later, another officer showed up. This time about illegal construction. The complaint said we were doing major work without permits because we had a rented dumpster parked out front. I showed the guy the permit taped to our window. He apologized and left. But it was obvious who was behind it. It got worse. Patricia started standing at her window with binoculars, watching us. Sometimes when I took the trash out, she'd step out onto her lawn and just stare. Not say anything. Just stare. One night around 10:30 p.m., I caught her creeping around in our front yard with a flashlight, pointing it at our flower beds. When I stormed outside and yelled at her, she dropped the flashlight and ran home without a word. Enough was enough. I bought security cameras and put them up at every angle of the yard. I made sure one pointed directly at her house. I started logging everything she did. When she stepped onto our property, when she shouted across the street, when she hovered by our driveway pretending to walk her dog, that wasn't even with her. And that's when the universe handed me something I couldn't have even made up if I tried. One afternoon, Mandy and I were walking our dog past her house when we saw her garage wide open and her car gone. There inside were piles and piles of boxes. One caught my eye. A box labeled Community Records sat wide open, and on top of it was a binder, plain as day. Something in me said, "Look." I walked up to the open garage, staying on the sidewalk, and used my phone's zoom camera. I could see the pages inside the binder. Names. Addresses. Photos. And then I saw it, maps of the street with notes written next to each house. Notes about who lived there, what kind of pets they had, when they left for work, when they came home. There were even taped pictures taken at night. She had a full-blown spy operation running on our street. And right there, stapled to the inside cover, was a list titled, Non-Compliant Homes. Our address was circled in red ink. That night, Mandy and I sat at our kitchen table looking over the photos I snapped. "This is crazy," Mandy whispered. "She's dangerous." I didn't disagree. We had to do something. But I knew one thing for sure. Patricia wasn't just some annoying neighbor. She was something else. And she had secrets she didn't want getting out. After seeing those files, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, going over everything in my head. Patricia wasn't just nosy. She wasn't just bossy. She was collecting information on people like it was her job. And she was targeting us now. The next morning, I printed out some of the pictures I had taken from her garage, the ones showing the files, the maps, the photos. I tucked them into a folder and decided to talk to a few neighbors face to face. First stop was Mr. Reed, the old guy 2 doors down. He'd lived on the street for 30 years. Always polite, kept to himself mostly. I figured if anyone knew the history, it was him. I showed him the photos. His face turned pale. "Jesus. I knew she was nosy, but this is bad," he muttered. He told me Patricia moved in about 8 years ago after her husband passed. At first, she was nice. Organized potlucks. Helped old folks rake leaves. But then, something snapped. She started calling the city on people. Started keeping tabs. Folks just stopped fighting her. Easier that way. Easier? No way. Not for me. I spent the next week quietly gathering allies. Mr. Reed. The Callahans across the street. The Campos family on the corner. All of them had stories. Trash finds. Complaints about kids' toys left on lawns. Even warnings about inappropriate seasonal decorations. Everyone was scared of Patricia because she fought dirty. Anonymous complaints. Petty harassment. She wore people down until they gave up. But now we had proof. I decided it was time to push back. We planned a block meeting. I told everyone to come to our garage Saturday night, no fancy invites, just word of mouth. I wanted it quiet so Patricia wouldn't catch on. Saturday came. Around 20 neighbors showed up, crammed into our garage on folding chairs and old milk crates. I passed around the folder with the photos. Gasps. Swearing. Anger. "She's been watching my kids?" Mrs. Campos said, voice shaking with rage. "She knew what time we left for church. She wrote it down," Mr. Reed said. "We agreed on 2 things that night. Nobody was safe until she was stopped. We had to be smart about it. If we went straight to the cops, Patricia would claim we were trespassing, or lying. If we tried to confront her head-on, she'd call the city or slap us with some bogus lawsuit. We needed more. We needed hard proof. So we set a plan, watch the watcher. The next 2 weeks felt like living in a spy movie. We coordinated like clockwork. Different neighbors would walk their dogs at different times, circling her house. Others would sit on porches pretending to read while recording video. Mr. Callahan had an old drone he used to check roof gutters. He flew it once, got shots of Patricia taking photos of the Ramirez family's backyard while hiding behind her trash cans. Every piece of footage, every date and time, went into a folder. Patricia had no idea she was the one being watched now. And then the rail break came. One evening, Mandy spotted Patricia dragging a trash bag out to the curb after dark. Something about the way she crept out, looking over her shoulder, caught Mandy's eye. The next morning before pickup, I took a walk by her house. The bag was still there, torn open by some raccoon or stray dog during the night. Papers were scattered across the curb. My heart was pounding as I bent down, pretending to tie my shoe, and snap photos of every document I could see. When I looked at them later, I felt sick. Patricia wasn't just keeping tabs on us. She was forging documents. I found fake violation notices she'd written up herself, designed to look like they were from the city. She had blank complaint forms with neighbors' names pre-filled out. She even had letters drafted to employers, threatening to expose people for code violations if they didn't comply. This wasn't some busybody worried about her street. This was a campaign of control. And it was about to explode in her face. I didn't know how deep Patricia's sickness went until a week later. We were getting ready to move on her, taking everything we gathered to the police, when Mr. Reed showed up at my door one night looking rattled. He was holding an old manila folder. "You need to see this," he said. I let him inside and we sat at the kitchen table. Mandy hovered close by. Mr. Reed explained he'd gone through some of his old neighborhood association paperwork from when he used to be on the board. Stuff he hadn't touched in years. Inside the folder were letters. Not just complaints from Patricia, restraining orders. 3 of them. All from her previous neighborhood. Apparently, Patricia had been forced out of her last community after terrorizing her neighbors there too. Harassment, false police reports, stalking. Even vandalism. One restraining order specifically mentioned her pouring bleach on someone's lawn after they painted their shutters an offensive yellow. She wasn't new to this. She was a repeat offender. And somehow, she slipped into our quiet street and started it all over again. We had to act fast. We decided to gather everything, the footage, the photos from her trash, the old restraining orders, and make a formal complaint. But before we could, Patricia must have sensed something. Maybe it was the way neighbors stopped smiling at her. Maybe she saw the way people crossed the street when she came outside. Because she struck first. One morning, I woke up to banging on the front door. Police. 2 officers stood there, serious faces, badges out. "Sir, we have a report that you've been harassing a neighbor, threatening her, taking illegal photographs, and trespassing on private property." My stomach dropped. Patricia had beaten us to the punch. She filed charges against me. I tried to explain, but the officers said they had to take a statement downtown. It wasn't an arrest, but it was still humiliating. As I sat in that stuffy interview room, all I could think was, this is exactly what she wants. Mandy called Mr. Reed, who rallied the other neighbors. By the time I was done giving my side, half the block had shown up at the police station, folders in hand, ready to talk. I could tell the officers were shocked at how much evidence we had. When they saw the old restraining orders, their whole tone changed. They let me go, and promised to open an official investigation into Patricia's harassment. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe we could breathe again. But Patricia wasn't done. That night, someone slashed Mandy's car tires. The next morning, a dead squirrel was left on our front porch. The message was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The dead squirrel on the porch was it for me. No more being careful. No more hiding. Patricia wanted war, and she was about to get it. I called a meeting with the neighbors again, this time in the Callahan's garage across the street. We laid everything out. The stalking, the fake documents, the slashed tires, the dead animal. Everyone agreed, press charges, file restraining orders, expose her. Mr. Reed took it one step further. He had a buddy who worked for the local news. That night, he made the call. By the next morning, there was a reporter on our street, camera rolling. I'll never forget it. Patricia tried to act normal at first. She was watering her garden when the reporter approached her, microphone out. "We have reports that you've been targeting your neighbors with harassment, fake violations, and even physical intimidation. Care to comment?" Patricia's face froze. Then she lost it. "I am this street," she screamed into the camera. "They're ruining everything. They need to be controlled." The reporter just stared at her, stunned. The footage aired that night on every local channel. It was worse than I could have hoped. They showed the files, the fake violation letters, even interviewed Mandy and Mr. Reed. By the next morning, city officials showed up at Patricia's house with a notice: cease and desist all harassment activities or face fines and possible criminal charges. But that wasn't even the real punishment. Her kids came. 2 grown adults I had never seen before pulled up that afternoon. One of them, her daughter, was red-faced and furious. They screamed at Patricia right there on her lawn. Neighbors stood outside watching. "You said you were better! You said you weren't doing this anymore!" her daughter shouted. Patricia tried to plead with them, but they weren't having it. Within an hour, they had her packed into the back of their SUV, crying and yelling the whole time. They drove her away. Word spread later that they were putting her into some kind of treatment facility. But it didn't fix everything right away. The damage she caused stuck around. Some neighbors blamed themselves for staying silent so long. Some friendships never fully healed. Mandy and I even thought about selling the house and moving, just to put it behind us. But we didn't. We stayed. And we rebuilt. Patricia's house sat empty for months. Eventually, a young couple bought it. Nice folks. Quiet. We helped them move in. Told them what happened, not to scare them, just so they understood. As for me, I learned something hard but true. You can't reason with people like Patricia. You can't ignore them and hope they go away. You fight them, you expose them, and you make damn sure they can't hurt anyone again. Even if you lose sleep. Even if you lose a piece of yourself doing it. Because if you don't, they win. And they never, ever stop on their own.